can hear. Can you hear me all right? Awesome. Well, Frey's talk was so inspiring and exciting. I'm here to talk to you about some maybe less exciting experiences, mostly around what we're seeing in New South Wales with Varroa spreading. So hopefully still useful information. But yeah, again, thanks, Kelly, for introducing me. I'm a New South Wales Varroa Development Officer. So our program is here until March of next year. So definitely reach out if you want help with Varroa. So just to tell you what I'm going to talk about today, I'll give you a little overview of the New South Wales Varroa heat map as it stands, to give you an idea of where Varroa has been detected and also reported. And then I'll dive into some case studies of what we've seen in the field that kind of highlights the risks that you might face with Varroa during especially this buildup phase or this spreading phase as Varroa makes its way across the state. So here is the Varroa heat map just taken earlier this month. This one shows the hive inspections for Varroa present over all time that the map has been available. And you can see kind of the areas where the mite has been detected the most, so the highest density of positive reports. So that's shown in the orange to red. You can definitely see that the mite has been reported most in this area, in the Hunter, in Newcastle, all the way down the Central Coast and into Sydney. So definitely relevant for this group. And also quite a few detections in Kempsey as well. And you can see some of the orange reaching further out west as well. So we're having more positives out west. We've also recently had some positives near Canberra and down in Bega as well. The South Coast is also experiencing a lot more positives. So that gives you a general idea of where the Varroa development officers have been really busy, and also to keep in mind what might be happening in your area. So with these case studies that I'm going to go into, I just want to remind you that these are some of the worst case scenarios. The VDOs are really largely being contacted by beekeepers in tough situations, so this could bias to an extent what we are seeing out in the field. But during this Varroa spread, we are, all in a tough situation where we're trying to work together, work through these issues, and figure out how we can overcome this together, right? So everyone's individual experience is going to vary based on your location, based on your environment, but really these case studies are just meant to prepare you for what you might see. So starting with case study number one, this was a Sydney-based beekeeper, and they were monitoring regularly for Varroa and also treating at recommended thresholds. So if you're unfamiliar with the thresholds, that's when the mite level in your hive gets to a level in your mite wash or your sugar shake or your soapy water wash where it could be damaging levels, and that's when you want to intervene with treatment. So for this beekeeper, the initial detection, they found mites below threshold in 6 of their hives, but one of their hive had 13 mites in their 300 bee sample for their alcohol wash. So that was above the threshold, and so they applied Baverol for 8 weeks. And after the Baverol was done, they did a post-treatment monitoring, and their results were below threshold. So that to them indicated, okay, we'll take it easy for a month, and then 4 weeks later, they did another alcohol wash, and they found 20 to 30 mites in 300 bees. So that told them, okay, we're above threshold again a month later after the Baverol came out. So they treated with Formic Pro at that point in time. And then 4 weeks later, they stayed on top of their alcohol washing and again found 10 to 15 mites in their washes throughout the apiary. And at that point, they said, okay, we're above threshold again. Let's treat with something different. And that time they chose Apiguard. So really here, the lesson learned from this case study is to watch for heavy reinfestation, especially in areas with high density of bees and a longer varroa history. So reinfestation could definitely catch you out if you're not monitoring regularly. If there are a lot of feral colonies in your area, they could be a reservoir for mites, and those mites could make their way back into your hive even after you've undergone a treatment. So something to consider. So on to case study number 2. So this was another Sydney-based beekeeper with 2 hives. She did alcohol washes about every 16 weeks. And one of her monitoring events in late April, she didn't find any mites. She had done an alcohol wash. But then 2 months later, in early July, her hives were dead, or one of them was next to dead. And we didn't actually go and see the hives in person, but she did send us a lot of pictures. And there was a lot of signs of mite infestation, and the few bees that were remaining in one of the hives did have a lot of mites on them. So varroa likely played a large role in the decline of those hives. And again, we also didn't necessarily see everything that was done with the alcohol washes, but in talking with the beekeeper, it seemed like she had done the proper alcohol wash. So really, this was the quickest case that we had seen from a negative monitoring event to complete colony decline, in just a little over 2 months. So this indicated to us that it's really important to start monitoring every month, especially as the varroa has this, heavy reinfestation happening, higher density in the environment. So definitely another lesson learned there is that you want to monitor for varroa monthly. And I've heard this quote attributed to John Lockwood: if you don't monitor, you're guessing, right? So it really helps to know the numbers of mites in your hives so you can make the most informed decisions around treatment. Just know what's going on. So on to case study number 3. So this is taking us down south to the South Coast. A VDO was called to a case where a beekeeper had done an alcohol wash and found about 15 mites in that wash. And this was actually the first case reported in that region. So the beekeeper was a bit surprised to find that many mites at that point in time. And the beekeeper did the right thing. A treatment was applied, and the VDO also supplied sticky mats to track the mite fall during that treatment. So weekly, they found a mite drop in that first week of 7,000 mites. Second week, 3,500 mites. Third week, 2,500 mites. So you can see that even in an alcohol wash of, say, 15 mites, there are actually a lot of mites in the hive that you can't necessarily see that might be under the brood cappings, right? So a little bit of a side lesson there. But another interesting thing was that the VDO was advised of a hive kept at a neighboring site at their neighbor's place. And when the VDO inspected, the hive was actually already dead, and there were signs of heavy mite infestation or parasitic mite syndrome, which I'll talk a little bit more on in the next case study. But that told the VDO that the likely cause of loss was probably a heavy infestation of varroa. But I think the surprising thing that we learned here was that even in areas where varroa hasn't been reported or detected previously, there's a potential for colony loss if that regular monitoring isn't undertaken. So you want to check the heat map. It's a good tool to see where the mite has been detected and reported, but you also don't want to get complacent, because if you could be the first one to find it in your area. So definitely another lesson learned about regular monitoring, right? So on to case study number 4. This was in the Hunter Valley. This beekeeper hadn't monitored previously, and the VDOs were called when the beekeeper started to notice bees crawling on the ground in front of the hive. So they thought, oh, this is concerning. We'd like to know what's going on here. Upon inspection, the VDOs found really substantial impacts on colony health, which we term parasitic mite syndrome. And the beekeeper did treat with Baverol. So even though this alcohol wash here, you can see a little over 300 mites per 300 bees, so extremely heavy infestation, right? The beekeeper thought, oh, well, I have Baverol on hand. We want to see if treatment will bring them back. And our VDO here also told them, let's baby the hive too. Let's feed them a lot. Let's take away some of that extra space. Let's, really keep them healthy through this treatment. So it was, pretty amazing to see that even with that infestation this spring, those hives are still alive and actually were building up and ready to swarm. So with a lot of care and attention, you can keep your bees healthy also. But you also don't want them to get to that point, right? You want to monitor. But let's talk a little bit about parasitic mite syndrome. So with that heavy infestation, you might start to see ejected and dead pupae out the front of the hive or at the bottom board. You might also see those adult workers crawling around on the ground because they've been heavily fed on. You might also see open or perforated cappings, evidence that mites had been under the brood cappings, as well as more, ejected pupae on the frames. And you'll also see a lot of unhealthy larvae. So you can see here these kind of scales or the sunken brown larvae. A lot of the parasitic mite syndrome signs can be very similar to foul brood. So it can look like AFB. You might have those kind of unhealthy looking cappings. You'll have really spotty brood patterns. So if you see this, it's also, you might be able to associate it with a high mite load if you do an alcohol wash or another good monitoring technique. But you also want to be sure that it's not a foul brood because you could have both at the same time. So it's also always good to take a sample on a slide and send it into the lab for testing to confirm or not, whether it's AFB or EFB. So always keep that in mind. But with parasitic mite syndrome, you can also see a lot of these kind of sunken yellow or twisting larvae, and that can look a lot like European foul brood as well. So here are just a few larvae that are showing those signs pointed out on this slide. You might also see Varroa frass or Varroa feces in the cells, so in the brood comb. They like to leave their feces in the 10 o'clock and 2 o'clock position in that brood cell. You can kind of see it here on the slide. I know it's maybe a little bit hard with the lighting, but it's kind of a little white, almost crystal-like substance that they put in those, that they leave in those brood cells during a heavy infestation especially. You'll see that more. Just you can find it by kind of tilting the brood frame a little bit to look up into the tops of those cells. You might also see Varroa actively on brood cells or in brood cells. And you could also start seeing Varroa on your adult bees. This is a really extreme example from that particular case. But basically, once you start seeing Varroa on adult bees, that usually means you have a high infestation because most of the mites like to be under the cappings. Once it's at a high infestation, they have nowhere else to go but on those adult bees, right? So yeah, these are all signs of that parasitic mite syndrome or a heavy infestation. So really the lesson learned here is that if you monitor at an early stage, you can identify the need for treatment and also reduce the risk of colony failure, just to keep them nice and healthy. So this is a curve that shows a little bit about the Varroa reproduction rate. So initially when a Varroa enters the hive, the foundress mite, it's hard to detect that single mite, right? So it'll go at low levels and you can't necessarily pick that up in an alcohol wash. until the mites start to build up. It becomes detectable after the mite has been in there for a certain amount of time. But then after being at a detectable level, that mite infestation rate can go up really fast because the mites actually reproduce at an exponential rate. So again, it's just that lesson. The main takeaway is that once Varroa is in your area and detected in your hive, it's really important to monitor monthly. So you're catching that before that curve gets really high, before it spikes. So in summary, what can you do about Varroa? Well, we've definitely heard today, monitor using your alcohol wash, soapy water wash, or your sugar shake. You really want to monitor monthly, especially if mites have been detected in your area, just to keep on top of some of those spikes in numbers, as well as that exponential rate of reproduction. You probably want to consider monitoring more frequently than 16 weeks where the mite hasn't been detected already. Again, just to make sure that you're not missing anything. Also, don't disregard the value of drone uncapping. It's a method to find mite presence and absence only, but if the mite hasn't been found in your area previously, it can be a quick way to look in the brood to see if any mites are under the cappings already. And then in terms of Varroa control, you really want to rely heavily on integrated pest management, so using a variety of different ways to control the mites to more sustainably manage them and more effectively manage them. And with that, you want to treat at your treatment thresholds, so make sure to wait until those mite levels are at a point where they could actually, beyond that, could actually damage the hive. So you're not constantly putting treatments in the hives. The treatments are expensive, right? So making sure you wait to treat until the mites are at that treatment threshold can save you some money too. Another thing to think about is minimizing swarming in spring. The more that we have swarms that end up in the environment, we start to replenish those feral colonies. And with that, it's still a reservoir for mites as well. So helping to keep the reinfestation levels down going forward, it's really helpful to manage swarming as well. And then, of course, learn and be prepared. It's awesome to see you all here today learning with us. Feel free to contact the Varroa development officers. We're happy to come out and help you. We do field visits where we can have monitoring demos with you, chat about treatment strategies for your specific situation. And you can also call us up with questions or email us when you get into a spot where you're just, I don't know what I want to do next. We can just talk that through and hopefully help you come to a decision. So we are here until March of next year, so keep that in mind. After that, the VDO program is done in New South Wales, so take advantage of us while we're around. And I guess another little note is that we're all in this together, we're all working together, so if you know there are neighboring beekeepers in your area, consider coordinating some treatments. Then maybe reducing the mite levels in your area all at the same time can also help with that reinfestation issue. So that's it for me. Just again, get in touch with the VDOs, and there is our email and phone number there as well. At the bottom, we have it's very small, but we have our website, varroa.org.au. That's a place full of a lot of resources about Varroa, and you can also enter a form there to ask for our help. So thank you so much for having me today and listening.